PC gaming versus console gaming, which should I choose? The traditional battle, PC gaming versus console gaming. It is the battle that divides players, so we have taken a better look and our outcomes would possibly simply shock you. General, a PC gives higher graphics, extra improved choices, and a larger number of video games than consoles, normally at a less expensive value. However, a console is rather more reasonably priced and accessible in the long term. However, the efficiency and the graphics normally aren't pretty much as good, and console video games are usually a bit dearer too. You've got most positively come throughout a dialogue on this topic someplace on the web. If it's not PlayStation versus Xbox, then it's PC versus each of them. So, let's get into the dialogue and discover out which one is best. Nicely, you is perhaps shocked to know that there's really not a simple reply to that query. Each PCs and consoles have many benefits and downsides. The query of which one is best for you is finally very subjective, because it depends upon each your preferences and your price range. On this article, we might be having a look on the most important components that you need to be mindful in case you're attempting to determine which platform fits you higher. Sorts of PCs and consoles. PCs, desktop versus laptop computer. The expression gaming PC usually leads individuals to consider some fancy desktop setup with tons of RGB lighting, however let's not overlook that gaming laptops are a factor, too. When evaluating desktops and laptops, nonetheless, a desktop might be a greater choice for gaming within the overwhelming majority of circumstances. That's as a result of gaming laptops usually function under powered elements, as it's powerful to maintain a gaming laptop computer working cool when each the CPU and GPU are below heavy load in a cramped chassis. Typically, individuals flip to external graphics cards. Nevertheless, these normally contain a reasonably hefty extra funding, and the bandwidth limitations nonetheless imply that a laptop computer with an exterior GPU receive it be as quick as a desktop with that very same GPU. To not point out that an exterior GPU case would possibly take away from the laptop computer's portability, which is considered one of its essential strengths. In any case, a gaming desktop is much better than a gaming laptop computer, each relating to efficiency and worth. The primary purpose why you would possibly need to go together with a gaming laptop computer is in case you spend quite a lot of time away from dwelling and need to have your video games with you. In any other case, a desktop setup is your greatest wager on each entrance. Consoles. As for consoles, there are a couple to select from. The primary gamers on this discipline are Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo. They usually all have their distinct consoles. First, we've got Sony's PlayStation and Microsoft's Xbox. Then, there's Nintendo's Switch. Usually talking, the PlayStation and the Xbox pack extra hardware energy than Nintendo's consoles. They usually function a wider number of video games, sharing lots of them with a PC. Nintendo, in flip, primarily locations its inventory in innovation and first-party titles. As such, it's troublesome to match the swap to the PC, and very like its predecessors, the Wii U and the unique Wii, it's a versatile console that's primarily interesting as a result of its modern new options and video games. However, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One are similar to one another and are additionally just like PC. Without going too in-depth with comparisons, the two important distinctions between the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One are the truth that the previous has extra high-quality single-player exclusives, whereas the latter has backward compatibility. Nevertheless, there's little level in evaluating them now that the 8th console technology is drawing to an in-depth. The PlayStation 4 is about to be succeeded by the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Sequence X is changing the Xbox One. Video games. We'll now talk about crucial side of any gaming platform, the video games themselves. Many builders as of late have consoles and console controllers primarily in thoughts when engaged on their video games, and that is mirrored within the PC launch, too. Fortunately, there aren't any vital gaps between most video games console and PC releases as of late, aside from some timed unique titles. For the time being, most console exclusives are first-party titles developed by the console producer attempting to spice up their hardware, gross sales and model, and that is most notably the case with Sony and Nintendo. However, There are total genres of video games which can be virtually absent from consoles: MMOs, MOBAs and technique video games. On prime of that, PC additionally has an extra vibrant indie scene and, after all, mods. Relating to shopping for video games on consoles, there are two methods to do it: get a digital copy by way of their respective community, PSN or Xbox Live, or purchase retail bodily copies. One benefit of getting bodily copies of video games is which you could at all times resell them or get them cheaper in case you purchase them used. That is one thing you possibly can't do with account-bound digital copies. PC video games, however, don't get bodily releases anymore. In fact, you possibly can nonetheless discover PC video games in shops, however these are normally simply containers containing an activation code for what's at the moment the preferred platform for PC gaming, Valve Steam. In fact, some large corporations similar to EA, Bethesda and Ubisoft even have their platforms/launchers that aren't essentially related to Steam. Nevertheless, it's not these launchers however third-party online shops which can be necessary, shops like Humble Bundle, GOG or Green Man Gaming. These, together with another shops, usually have higher offers than Steam does, so they're good options to buying PC video games. On prime of that, there are additionally the so-called gray markets, similar to Kinguin, which function platforms for promoting and reselling video games. Compatibility. As we've already talked about, each recreation launched for a console will work effectively on stated console. Nevertheless, there are at all times some exceptions that place sure video games are both too demanding for the growing old hardware, or just aren't optimized effectively sufficient. PC video games normally aren't as well optimized, and a few releases may have critical points with bugs and crashes, which is barely pure contemplating that a PC could possibly be using all types of hardware from throughout a number of years. That's why optimization is a little more problematic in PCs than relating to standardized configurations utilized by consoles. One thing else that must be thought of is backwards compatibility. On a PC, it is possible for you to run most video games straight out of the gate, and whereas some older releases receive it be working flawlessly on newer hardware, it normally doesn't take a lot of effort to repair. In the meantime, backwards compatibility has been a little bit of a difficulty relating to consoles. The Xbox One was suitable with a lot of the older Xbox releases, whereas the PlayStation 4 couldn't run any of its predecessor's titles. The scenario is wanting higher on this entrance now that each the Xbox Sequence X and the PlayStation 5 might be backwards suitable. Nevertheless, the latter will solely be capable to run PS4 titles, and PS3 video games will solely be playable by way of PlayStation Now. Conclusion. And people can be all of the factors to think about when evaluating console and PC gaming. Finally, it's all very subjective, so which of those lastly current higher worth might be as much as you to determine. We'll go away you with a summary of the professionals and cons of every platform.